Millionaire swears no one can ride the wild bull until a 5-year-old boy climbs on. Richard Thompson watched with satisfaction the reinforced pen where he kept his most valuable black bull. For 3 years, no ranch hand had managed to stay on that animal for more than 5 seconds, and that was a point of pride for the wealthiest rancher in the Dallas area. Then he saw something that made him question his own vision. A small boy, no older than 5, had slipped under the fence and was now sitting calmly on the bull's back as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Good Lord above," murmured Richard, taking off his hat and scratching his graying hair. The bull, which moments earlier had been snorting and pawing the ground, now walked gently around the pen. The boy, wearing a beige t-shirt and jeans, stroked the animal's neck as if they were old friends. "Ethan, get down here right now," shouted a woman's voice from the direction of the main house. The woman running toward the pen was Sarah Wilson, 42, who had started working as a cook on the ranch just 2 weeks earlier. Her face showed a mix of panic and resignation, as if this scene wasn't entirely unexpected. "Mrs. Wilson, get that boy out of there now," ordered Richard, his voice wavering between authority and disbelief. Sarah stopped by the fence, watching her son with an expression the rancher couldn't quite decipher. There was worry, yes, but also a kind of maternal pride. "Ethan, honey, come down slowly," she said calmly, holding out her arms. The boy looked at his mother and smiled, revealing 2 front teeth still coming in. "Mom, he's really pretty, and he's not mad at me." "I know, sweetheart, but you know you can't do this without asking." Richard watched in astonishment as the boy slid smoothly off the bull's back. The animal remained completely still the entire time. When Ethan touched the ground, the bull lowered its head and let the boy stroke its muzzle. "How in the world is this possible?" Richard muttered to himself, but loud enough for Sarah to hear. She sighed, took her son's hand, and gently led him away from the bull. "Mr. Thompson, I can explain. Ethan has always had this gift with animals since he was a baby." "Gift?" repeated the rancher, his voice thick with skepticism. "Ma'am, that bull has sent 6 men to the hospital, experienced men, ranch hands who've worked with cattle for decades." "I understand your concern, sir, but Ethan doesn't see animals the way we do. To him, they're just friends waiting to play." Richard pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The late afternoon sun beat down on the ranch, casting long shadows across the pastures. In the distance, other workers began to gather, drawn by the shouting. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. "Listen carefully, Mrs. Wilson," Richard said, his tone turning stern. "I don't know what kind of trick your boy pulled, but this can't happen again. That bull is worth more than most houses in this town. If anything happens to him or to the boy—" "It wasn't a trick, sir," Ethan interrupted, his voice small but firm. "The bull was sad. I just wanted to make him feel better." Richard stared at the boy, torn between irritation and curiosity. There was something in the simplicity of that answer that unsettled him deeply. "Sad? Bulls don't get sad, boy. Bulls are animals, not people." "But he was," Ethan insisted, pointing to the bull, which now stood by the fence, watching the conversation. "Look at his eyes. They're wet." Richard followed the boy's gaze and, for a moment, thought there really was something different about the bull's behavior. The animal seemed calmer, but also melancholic. "Sarah, take the boy home and keep him away from this pen. Keep. I'll have an electric fence installed first thing tomorrow." "Yes, sir," she replied, but her voice carried a note of sadness. As mother and son walked away, Richard stayed watching the bull. The animal walked up to the fence and stood there, as if waiting for something. For the first time in 3 years, the rancher wondered if he truly knew that animal as well as he thought. That night, during dinner served by Sarah, Richard couldn't shake the scene from his mind. His wife, Linda, noticed his distraction. "Richard, you're awfully quiet today. Did something happen at the ranch?" "Linda, do you think a 5-year-old could have some kind of special connection with animals?" Linda raised an eyebrow, knowing her husband well after 30 years of marriage. Why do you ask? Richard told her what had happened, expecting his wife to share his skepticism. Instead, Linda grew thoughtful. I remember my grandmother telling stories about people like that. She said some children are born with hearts closer to animals. Linda, please, that's superstition. Maybe. But you saw it with your own eyes, didn't you? Richard didn't answer, just kept pushing food around his plate without appetite. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Richard went to check on the bull. To his surprise, he found Ethan sitting outside the pen, sharing a piece of bread with the animal, which stretched its head between the fence boards. "How'd you get here so early, boy?" Ethan looked at him with those big, dark eyes so typical of childhood. "I wake up when he calls me." "When he calls you?" Richard repeated, thinking he'd misheard. "Yeah, he gets sad at night and I feel it, so I come keep him company." Richard watched the scene for a few minutes. The bull really did seem different around the boy, more docile, almost gentle. "Ethan, where's your mother?" "Making coffee in the kitchen. She knows I come here, and she lets you?" "She said I have to be careful, but I can't ignore someone who needs help." Those simple words echoed in Richard's mind in a way he hadn't expected. When was the last time he'd thought about helping someone without expecting anything in return? Over the following days, even with the electric fence installed, Ethan kept finding ways to get close to the bull. Richard began to suspect Sarah was helping her son by turning off the electricity at certain times. "Sarah, I need to talk to you," he said one afternoon, calling her into the ranch office. The cook entered with flour still on her hands, evidence she'd been preparing lunch. "Yes, Mr. Richard." "Have a seat, please." Sarah hesitated, clearly uncomfortable sitting in her employer's presence. "Go ahead. This isn't a scolding. At least, not yet." She perched on the edge of the chair, hands clasped in her lap. "I want to understand more about your boy. Where did you come from? Why did you seek work here specifically?" Sarah took a deep breath as if she'd known this moment would come. "Sir, I wasn't lying when I said Ethan has a special gift. My late husband, his father, had it too. That's how we met, actually." "How so?" "I worked on a ranch in Arkansas. Michael was the vet there. Whenever there was an injured or frightened animal, they'd call him. The creatures would calm down just seeing Michael walk up." Richard leaned forward, interested despite himself. "And Ethan inherited this from his father?" "Since he was very little. When he was 2, we brought home an injured dog. The poor thing was almost in very bad shape. Ethan sat beside him and kept humming softly. The next day, the dog was playing in the yard. Where is your husband now?" Sarah's face closed off, and Richard realized he had touched on a painful subject. "Michael passed 2 years ago. A work accident. Ethan still asks about his father sometimes." "I'm sorry." "Thank you, sir. After we were left alone, we had to leave Arkansas. I couldn't stay in that place anymore. I came to Chicago because I heard you needed a cook. How did you know specifically about my farm?" Sarah hesitated again, and Richard sensed there was more to the story. "The truth, sir, is that Michael knew this area. He worked here years ago before we met." "He worked here? For me?" "Not exactly for you, for the previous owner of this property." Richard felt as though he'd been struck by lightning. He had bought that farm 15 years ago from a man named William Wilson, who was going through financial difficulties. William Wilson was my father-in-law, Michael's father. The silence that followed was so heavy, Richard could hear his own heartbeat. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the floor, waiting for his reaction. "You're telling me Ethan is the grandson of the former owner of this farm?" "Yes, sir." "And you didn't think it was important to mention that when you came looking for work? I was afraid you wouldn't hire me, or that you'd think I wanted to cause trouble." Richard stood and walked to the window, gazing at the pastures he now knew had once belonged to Ethan's grandfather. Many puzzle pieces were falling into place in his mind. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Sarah, where were you living before coming here? In Cicero, at a boarding house. It wasn't a good place to raise Ethan. And why didn't you reach out to other relatives, other members of the Wilson family? There's no one left, sir. My parents passed when Ethan was a baby, and Michael's family scattered after we lost the farm. Richard returned to his chair, processing all this information. William Wilson had been a proud man who raised cattle with passion. The sale of the farm had been forced by medical debts from his wife's long illness. The bull, Richard said suddenly. That black bull was part of the herd when I bought the property. Yes, Sarah confirmed. Michael told me Thunder was his father's favorite. William raised him from a calf. Thunder? That's what Ethan calls him. He said the bull whispered the name in his ear. A chill ran down Richard's spine. This was getting stranger than he could accept. Sarah, I'll be direct with you. This whole story is making me very uneasy. I don't know if I believe in these special connections with animals, but I can't deny what I've seen with my own eyes. I understand, sir. If you'd prefer we leave. I didn't say that, but I need to set some rules. Ethan can visit the bull, but always with supervision, and you have to tell me everything about this farm's history that I don't know. Everything, sir? Everything. Sarah nodded, seeming relieved not to have to keep any more secrets. That afternoon, after finishing lunch, Sarah told Richard stories about the time when the farm had belonged to the Wilsons. William had built that property with his own hands, starting with a small cattle operation and gradually expanding. Thunder had been the first breeding bull on the farm, and William treated him almost like a son. Was your father-in-law as attached to animals as Ethan? Michael said he was. William would talk to the cattle, knew each animal by name. He claimed they had personalities of their own. And when the farm was sold, why did Thunder stay? William was very sick at the time. Michael tried to convince him to at least take Thunder, but his father said the bull was born on this land and should stay here. Richard began to understand why Thunder had become so aggressive in recent years. The animal had lost not only his owner, but the entire family he'd known since he was a calf. Sarah, do you think Thunder recognizes Ethan as part of the Wilson family? I'm sure he does. Animals have a different kind of memory than we do. They remember through sense, sounds, the energy of people. This conversation made Richard rethink many things about how he ran his farm. He'd always seen animals as investments, numbers on a spreadsheet. The idea that they could have feelings or memories was something his rational mind resisted accepting. By late afternoon, Richard decided to observe Ethan and Thunder without them knowing he was there. He hid behind the barn and watched the interaction between the boy and the bull. Ethan was sitting on the ground, leaning against the fence, telling Thunder a story. The bull lay on the other side, his head close to the planks, as if truly listening. "Grandpa William really loved you, didn't he, Thunder?" Ethan said in his childlike voice. "Mom told me you two were best friends." The bull let out a low sound, almost like a sigh. "I know you miss him. I miss my daddy too, but we can be friends now, right?" Richard felt something strange stir in his chest, a mix of emotion and confusion he didn't know how to process. That child was comforting an animal in a way he'd never imagined possible. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about his conversation with Sarah and the scene he'd witnessed between Ethan and Thunder. Linda noticed his restlessness. "What's troubling you, Richard?" "I'm starting to question a lot of things I always believed were true." "About what?" "About how I treat animals, about what it really means to own a farm, about whether I'm a good man." Linda turned in bed to face him. "Why are you thinking about this now?" Richard told her about his talk with Sarah and discovering that Ethan was the grandson of the farm's previous owner. My God, Richard. That woman and that child lost everything. And now they're working on land that once belonged to their family. Exactly. And here I am treating Thunder like a trophy when he was really like a member of the Wilson family. What do you plan to do? I don't know yet, but I feel I need to do something to make this right. The next morning, Richard woke up determined to learn more about William Wilson's story. He drove into town and went to the county clerk's office where the farm sale had been recorded. The clerk, an elderly man named Stanley, remembered the transaction well. "Oh yes, William Wilson. What a sad situation that was. The man was desperate to pay off his hospital debts. How so? His wife, Mrs. Mary Elizabeth, was hospitalized for months before she passed. The medical bills wiped out the family's savings. William had to sell the farm to avoid losing everything. And what happened to him after the sale? He moved to a small house on the outskirts of town, lived another 2 years, but he never recovered from losing his wife and the property. They say he spent his days talking about his animals, especially a black bull he had raised. Richard felt a heavy weight in his stomach. He had bought the ranch for a price well below market value, knowing about William's financial struggles. At the time, he had considered it a good deal. Stanley, did William leave a will? Any documents? Yes, he did. In fact, there are some papers of his still filed here. No one ever came to collect them. Stanley went to an old filing cabinet and returned with a yellowed folder. Here it is, some personal documents and a simple will. Richard opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were birth certificates, cattle records, and a handwritten letter addressed to whoever takes care of my ranch after me. The letter was touching and detailed. William described every animal he was leaving behind, but devoted entire paragraphs to Thunder. He asked the new owner to take special care of the bull, explaining his personality and emotional needs. Thunder isn't just an animal. He's a loyal companion who stood by me through the hardest times of my life. I beg you to treat him with kindness and patience. He may seem fierce with strangers, but it's because he feels deeply when someone he loves leaves. Richard read the entire letter twice, feeling smaller with every word. He had turned William's beloved animal into a spectacle to impress visitors. Back at the ranch, Richard found Sarah in the kitchen. Sarah, I need you to tell me everything about William. How did he care for Thunder? What were their routines? Sarah stopped peeling potatoes and looked at him in surprise. Why are you asking this, sir? Because I've realized I don't truly know the animal I've had for 15 years, and I want to learn. During their conversation, Sarah shared details that moved Richard deeply. William used to sing to Thunder during morning milkings. He took the bull to graze in the greenest pastures and let him roam freely during the day. What changed when I bought the ranch? Well, sir, the new manager you hired back then thought Thunder was too big and strong to be left loose. That's when they built the special pen. And how did Thunder react? Michael told me the animal was very restless the first few months. He tried breaking the fences, refused food. He grew more and more aggressive. Richard realized he had created a prison for an animal that once lived in freedom. Worse, he had taken pride in Thunder's aggression, seeing it as proof of his strength and value. That afternoon, Richard made a decision that surprised everyone on the ranch. He ordered the special pen's fences to be removed and replaced with a simple one, allowing Thunder to roam freely across a much larger area. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, back to the story. Mr. Richard, are you sure about this? Asked Frank, the ranch foreman. Thunder could hurt someone if he's loose. Frank, let's try it, but I want Ethan nearby during the change. If anything goes wrong, he seems to be the only one who can calm the animal. The fence removal took all afternoon. Ethan stayed seated near Thunder the whole time, speaking softly to him. To everyone's surprise, the bull remained calm, just watching the work. When the last plank was removed and Thunder realized he could move freely, something magical happened. The animal took a few hesitant steps as if he couldn't believe his freedom, then began walking across the pasture with a grace Richard had never noticed before. Ethan ran alongside Thunder, laughing and shouting with joy. The bull lowered its head and let the boy hug him. Look, Thunder, now you can go wherever you want. Richard watched the scene with tears in his eyes. For the first time in 15 years, he was seeing Thunder truly happy. In the days that followed, the change in Thunder's behavior was remarkable. The animal explored every corner of the property, always accompanied by Ethan. They developed a routine. Ethan would wake up early, have breakfast with his mother, and then spend the entire day with Thunder, showing him places on the ranch the bull hadn't seen in years. Richard began following these walks from a distance, fascinated by the bond between the boy and the animal. Ethan talked to Thunder as if the bull understood every word, and in a way, it seemed he did. Ethan, Richard said one morning, approaching the two. "Can I ask you something?" The boy looked at him with those big, curious eyes. "Of course, Mr. Richard." "How do you know what Thunder is feeling?" Ethan thought for a moment, as if the question were very difficult. "It's hard to explain. It's like when you're sad and someone can see it on your face. But with animals, I feel it inside." "And what is Thunder feeling right now?" Ethan placed his hand on Thunder's neck and closed his eyes. He's happy but also confused. He's remembering old things and wondering if he can trust again. Those simple words hit Richard like a punch to the gut. How many people in his life had felt exactly that way about him? How many times had he broken someone's trust in the name of business or profit? That evening, Richard invited Sarah and Ethan to dine in the main house, much to Linda's surprise, who wasn't used to having employees at the table. "Sarah, I have a proposal for you," Richard said during dinner. "Yes, sir?" "I'd like you to move into the foreman's house. It's been empty for 2 years. Ethan needs more space to play, and you deserve better living conditions." Sarah was speechless for a moment. "Sir, that's very generous, but I don't know if we can accept." "It's not generosity, Sarah. It's justice. This land belonged to your family. The least I can do is make sure you have a proper home here." "Thank you, Mr. Richard. I don't know how to thank you. You can thank me by continuing to teach me how to properly care for the animals on this ranch." Over the following weeks, Richard began transforming not just Thunder's treatment, but the entire philosophy of the ranch. He implemented more humane cattle handling practices, created rotating grazing areas so the animals always had fresh pasture, and established animal welfare protocols. Ethan became a sort of unofficial consultant, helping to identify stressed or sick animals. His observations, though coming from a 5-year-old, were surprisingly accurate. "Mr. Richard," Ethan said one afternoon, "the spotted cow near the pond is sad." "How do you know that, Ethan?" "She always stays away from the others, and she's not eating right." Richard called the vet, who confirmed the cow had an early-stage intestinal infection, almost undetectable to untrained eyes. "How did the boy notice that?" the vet asked. "Honestly, doctor, I have no idea." But he's always right. Ethan's reputation began to spread through the region. Other ranchers came to consult the boy who talked to animals, first out of curiosity, then out of real need. Richard began to feel a pride in Ethan that he'd never felt for any employee. The boy was turning the ranch into something better, more prosperous and more humane, but not everything was easy. Some of the older employees resisted the changes, especially those who were used to more rigid handling methods. "Boss, this idea of giving animals freedom is going to cause trouble," said Jake, one of the most experienced cowhands. "Cattle need to know who's in charge." "Jake, how many years have you worked here?" 22, boss." "And in all those years, how many times have you seen a hurt or stressed animal produce more milk or meat?" "Well, never, I guess." "So why insist on methods we know don't work?" Jake scratched his head, clearly confused. "It's just how it's always been, boss. My dad taught me this way, his father too. What if I told you there's a better way? One your parents didn't know because they never had the chance to learn." Gradually, even the most resistant employees began to notice the animals were calmer, healthier, and as a result more productive. Milk production increased by 20% in the first month after the changes. But the real test came when Richard received an unexpected visitor. "Mr. Thompson," the secretary said over the intercom, "there's a man here who says he's a reporter from an agriculture magazine. He wants to do a story on the ranch." Richard hesitated. He'd always avoided publicity, preferring to keep his operations private. "Send him in." The reporter, a young man named Ryan, explained he'd heard rumors about revolutionary changes on Richard's ranch. "Mr. Thompson, is it true you've increased productivity by improving animal welfare?" "It's true, yes. But I didn't figure it out. A 5-year-old boy did." Ryan raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "A 5-year-old boy? Want to meet him?" Richard took Ryan to see Ethan, who was in the pasture with Thunder. The scene was striking. The boy was riding the bull, which walked calmly while other cows and calves followed. "My God," Ryan murmured, pulling out his camera. "Can I take photos?" "Ethan, do you mind if he takes some pictures of you with Thunder?" "I don't mind," Ethan replied, smiling. "But you gotta ask Thunder too." Ethan whispered something in the bull's ear, and it let out a low moo. He said it's okay, but only a few. He doesn't like noise much. Ryan watched the interaction with complete disbelief. "How is this possible?" "That's the question I ask myself every day," Richard answered. The article ran in the national magazine 3 weeks later, titled "The Boy Who Transformed a Ranch." The photos of Ethan riding Thunder caused a sensation, and Richard started getting calls from ranchers, veterinarians, and even researchers interested in the ranch's methods. "Richard, do you realize what's happening?" Linda said during breakfast, showing him her phone. "They're talking about our ranch on TV." It was true. A local morning show was discussing the magazine piece, debating animal welfare and alternative cattle-raising methods. "The case of the Dallas ranch raises important questions about our relationship with livestock," the host read. "Are we underestimating animals' emotional intelligence?" Richard watched with a mix of pride and concern. On one hand, he was happy the message about animal welfare was spreading. On the other, he worried the attention might harm Ethan and Sarah, who preferred a quieter life. His fears were confirmed when unannounced visitors started arriving. Some were serious researchers, eager to study Ethan's bond with the animals. Others were simply curious, treating the boy like a tourist attraction. "Mr. Thompson," Sarah said one afternoon, clearly concerned. "Ethan is feeling pressured with all these visits. Yesterday he asked me if he had done something wrong." "What do you mean?" "He doesn't understand why everyone wants to take pictures of him. He thinks maybe he did something to upset the adults." Richard felt a pang of guilt. In his excitement over the positive changes on the farm, he had forgotten that Ethan was just a child who needed protection and normalcy. "Sarah, I'll handle this. Starting tomorrow, no visits will be allowed without prior scheduling, and Ethan will only participate if he wants to." "Thank you, sir. I know your intentions are good, but I'm a selfish adult who was using a child to promote my farm," Richard finished. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to, you're right, I'll be more careful." That evening, Richard talked to Ethan about the whole situation. "Ethan, do you like it when people come here to meet you?" The boy thought carefully before answering. "Some people are nice, but some make Thunder nervous." "How do you know he's nervous?" "He breathes differently, and he keeps looking at the corners, searching for a place to hide." "And how do you feel when that happens?" "I feel sad for Thunder, and I also get confused because I don't understand why people think it's strange that we're friends." That answer touched Richard deeply. Ethan didn't see his connection with the animals as something extraordinary, just as a natural friendship. "Ethan, if you could choose, would you prefer people to stop coming here?" "Not all of them, just the ones who don't really like the animals. You can tell when someone is pretending." "How?" "They talk too loudly near the animals. And they always want to touch them, even when the animal doesn't want to." Richard decided to implement new rules for visitors. Only small groups, scheduled in advance, and always with a farm employee present to guide them on proper behavior around the animals. The changes worked. The visits became more productive and less stressful for everyone involved. Ethan relaxed again, and Thunder regained his usual calm. But the real test of the farm's transformation would come a few months later when Richard received an unexpected call. "Mr. Thompson, this is Dr. Helen from the University of Chicago. We're conducting research on animal behavior and emotional intelligence in cattle. We'd like to include your farm in the study." "What kind of study?" "We want to scientifically document behavioral changes in animals under different management approaches. Your farm would represent welfare-based management." Richard hesitated. On one hand, scientific validation of the changes would be important. On the other, he didn't want to expose Ethan to more pressure. "Doctor, I can participate in the study, but I have some conditions. The boy on the farm is a minor and can't be treated as a research subject." "Of course, sir. Our main interest is the animals and management methods. Interaction with the child would only be observational, if the parents allow it." After speaking with Sarah, who agreed to Ethan's limited participation, Richard agreed to collaborate with the research. The researchers arrived the following week. a team of 3 veterinarians specializing in animal behavior and a psychologist. They spent an entire week on the farm, observing, measuring cortisol levels in the animals and documenting interactions. Mr. Thompson, Dr. Helen said at the end of the study, the results are truly impressive. Your animal's stress levels are among the lowest we've ever recorded. And the productivity is above the national average. What about Ethan? What have you observed? That's even more fascinating. The child seems to have a natural ability to read subtle body language in animals, possibly a combination of innate sensitivity and life experience. Do you believe this can be taught to others? We believe so, at least in part. Ethan has shown that much of what we consider animal instinct is actually communication we're learning to interpret. The research was published in an international scientific journal, solidifying Richard Thompson's ranch as a model for ethical and productive farming. But for Richard, the most important thing was seeing Ethan's genuine happiness and Thunder's positive transformation. The bull had become a completely different animal, calm, sociable, and even affectionate with people who treated him with respect. "Sarah," Richard said one Sunday afternoon as they watched Ethan play with Thunder in the pasture, "I have a proposal for you." "Yes, sir?" "I'd like you to become a partner in the ranch." Sarah looked at him as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. "What do you mean, sir?" "The ranch is thriving far beyond my expectations. Part of that is due to the changes we implemented because of Ethan. It's only fair that you share in the profits." "Mr. Thompson, that's very generous, but it's not generosity, Sarah, it's recognition. Ethan has transformed this place, and you've helped me understand things about animals that I ignored for 15 years. But I don't know anything about business. You can learn. Linda has always wanted someone to help with the administrative side, and Ethan can keep doing what he does best, caring for the animals." Sarah fell silent for a long moment, watching her son. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, there's no rush." That night, Sarah talked at length with Ethan about Richard's proposal. "Mom, what does being a partner mean?" "It means the ranch would be partly ours too. We'd have responsibilities, but also rights." "And Thunder? Would he stay here?" "Yes, sweetheart, he'd stay here." "Then I like the idea, but there's one condition." "What condition?" "I want all the animals on the ranch to have proper names, like Thunder." Sarah smiled. Even at just 5 years old, Ethan already showed wisdom about what truly mattered. The next morning, Sarah sought out Richard. "Mr. Thompson, I accept your proposal, but I have one condition," suggested by Ethan. "What is it?" "Every animal on the ranch must have a proper name." Richard laughed, imagining the workers' reactions. "Sarah, we have over 300 head of cattle. Ethan said he can help choose the names." "All right. If that's part of the deal, I accept." In the following months, the ranch underwent an even deeper transformation. Ethan worked tirelessly to name every animal, basing his choices on their personalities and physical traits. Star was a cow with a white spot on her forehead. Tricky was a calf who always escaped the fence. Princess was a heifer who walked with her head held high. The workers, initially resistant, began to care for the animals as individuals. It was easier to look after Star than animal number 247. "Boss," Jake said one afternoon, "I have to admit, this naming thing makes a difference. We care more about each animal." "Why do you think that is, Jake?" "I don't know. When an animal has a name, it becomes a person, you know, not just another animal." Richard smiled. Jake had intuitively grasped something it had taken him months to understand. Treating animals as unique individuals, not just resources, improved both their well-being and the ranch's productivity. The partnership between Richard and Sarah proved to be extremely successful. She proved to be a natural administrator, organizing the bureaucratic side of the ranch with an efficiency that even impressed Linda. "Richard, this woman is a treasure," Linda said one evening. "She sorted through 15 years of paperwork in just 2 months. And Ethan? Ethan is growing up surrounded by love and purpose. He couldn't be in a better place." Indeed, Ethan thrived in the ranch environment. Besides his natural gift with animals, he began showing interest in other areas. Linda had started teaching him to read using books about animals, and the boy absorbed knowledge with an impressive thirst. "Aunt Linda," Ethan would say, using the affectionate term he'd naturally adopted. Why do some books say oxen are dumb? What do you think, Ethan? I think the adults who wrote those books never met real oxen. Thunder is really smart. How do you know he's smart? He solves problems. Yesterday, when the pasture gate was stuck, he pushed it with his head in a special way to open it, and he remembers everything. If I hide food somewhere, he always remembers where it is. Linda began documenting Ethan's observations about animal behavior. Without realizing it, the boy was building a knowledge base that rivaled academic studies. The ranch's reputation continued to grow, but in a more controlled way. Richard established an educational visitation program where schools and universities could bring groups to learn about animal welfare and sustainability. The idea, Richard explained to visitors, is to show that caring for animals well isn't just an ethical matter, it's also an economic one. Happy animals are more productive. Ethan became the official guide for these visits, explaining concepts in his simple language that many adults struggled to understand. Cows are happier when they can choose where to graze, he told a group of college students, and when they're happy, they make more milk for their babies. But how do you know they're happy? A student asked. They sing, Ethan replied, as if it were obvious. Sing? Yeah, every cow has her own special sound. When they're happy, their moo is higher. When they're sad, it's deeper. The student glanced at the professor accompanying the group, who simply smiled and took notes. These educational visits became an additional source of income for the ranch, as well as a way to spread knowledge about more humane animal raising practices. One day, Richard received a visit that would change the course of his life once again. Mr. Thompson, the secretary said, there's a woman here who says she's related to Mrs. Sarah Wilson. Richard was surprised. Sarah had always said she had no family. The visitor was a woman in her 60s with graying hair and a face marked by time. My name is Catherine Wilson, she said. I'm the sister of Michael, Ethan's father. Richard felt his heart race. Catherine Wilson, another member of the ranch's original family. Please have a seat. Sarah is at her house with Ethan. Would you like me to call her? Actually, I'd like to speak with you first. About what? Catherine hesitated as if gathering courage. Mr. Thompson, I need to tell you some things Sarah doesn't know. About my father, about this ranch and why we really lost it. I'm listening. My father didn't lose the ranch just because of medical debts. He was cheated. Richard felt a knot in his stomach. Cheated how? Someone altered property documents, made it look like my father owed much more money than he actually did. When he tried to dispute it, the original papers had disappeared. And who did this? Catherine looked him straight in the eye. The lawyer who handled the sale of the ranch to you. Richard Thompson fell silent for a long moment, processing the information. The lawyer in question, Dr. Foster, had died 5 years earlier. If Catherine was telling the truth, Richard had been used in a fraudulent scheme. Catherine, do you have proof of this? I have some documents my father hid before he passed, but I never tried to do anything because I thought you might have been involved in the scheme. And now? Now I know you weren't. The way you're treating my sister-in-law and nephew shows you're an honest man. Catherine pulled an old folder of documents from her bag. These are the original papers my father managed to save. They show the real amount of the debts and some notes about meetings with Dr. Foster. Richard examined the documents with growing horror. It was clear William Wilson had been the victim of an elaborate scam, and he himself had been used as an unwitting tool in the fraud. Catherine, what do you want me to do with this information? I want justice for my father. Not necessarily legal justice, it's been too long for that, but I want the truth to be known. And the ranch? These documents prove the sale was fraudulent. Mr. Thompson, my father is gone. My brother too. Sarah and Ethan are all that's left of our family, and from what I see, they're happy here. I don't want to ruin that. But technically, the ranch should belong to you. The ranch belongs to whoever has cared for it with love all these years. You've turned this place into something my father would be proud to see. Richard was moved by Catherine's generosity. Even so, I need to do the right thing. I'll transfer full ownership of the ranch to Sarah and Ethan. It's what William would have wanted. Mr. Thompson, that's not necessary. Yes, it is. And call me Richard. We're family now." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sarah and Ethan, coming in from the pasture. Ethan still carried tufts of grass in his hands as a gift for the younger calves. "Sarah," Catherine said, rising from her chair. Sarah froze, immediately recognizing the sister-in-law she hadn't seen in years. "Catherine, how did you find me?" "I read about you in the magazine. Then I saw the news on TV. It wasn't hard to figure out where you were." The two women embraced, and Richard sensed there was a lot of unresolved history between them. "Mom, who is she?" Ethan asked. "That's your Aunt Catherine, your daddy's sister." Ethan studied Catherine with curiosity, then suddenly ran to her and hugged her without hesitation. "Aunt Catherine, do you want to meet Thunder?" Catherine smiled, tears in her eyes. "Of course I do, sweetheart." As Ethan led Catherine to meet Thunder, Richard told Sarah about the documents and what he'd uncovered about the fraud. "Sarah, I had no idea about any of this. If I'd known—" "Richard, I know you're an honest man. You don't have to explain yourself. But I need to do what's right. I'll transfer the ranch to you and Ethan. It's what William would have wanted. That's not necessary. We're partners now, and partners share both the struggles and the successes. Sarah, please, let me do this. I need to sleep at night knowing I've corrected an injustice." From the pasture came the sound of laughter. Catherine, Ethan, and Thunder had become fast friends. "Aunt Catherine," Ethan called, "Thunder says you smell like family." "How did he say that?" Catherine asked, laughing. "He nuzzled you and made that soft sound that means good kin." Catherine looked over at Sarah and Richard, watching from the porch. "This boy really is something special, isn't he?" "Special doesn't even cover it," Richard replied. "He's changed my whole life." That evening, Catherine dined with the whole extended family: Richard, Linda, Sarah, and Ethan. The conversation flowed naturally, as if they were old friends reuniting. "Catherine," asked Linda, "do you plan to stay in the area?" "Actually, I've been thinking about it. There's nothing keeping me in Arkansas anymore, and I'd like to be close to Ethan." "Why don't you stay here at the ranch?" Ethan suggested. "There's plenty of space." "Ethan's right," said Richard. "There are several empty houses on the property. You'd be more than welcome." Catherine hesitated. "I don't want to be a burden." "You'd be the opposite of a burden," said Sarah. "Ethan needs to know his family's history, and I need my sister-in-law back." That's how Catherine became another member of the extended ranch family. She settled into one of the smaller houses near the main pasture and quickly found her place in the daily routine. Catherine had experience with gardening and started an organic vegetable patch to supply the ranch kitchen. Ethan helped her every morning, learning about plants with the same intuition he had for animals. "Aunt Catherine, why do you talk to the plants?" "Because they like attention just like animals do." "And do they answer?" "In their own way, yes. Look how green and strong this lettuce is. It's because I know it needs more water in the morning and less sun in the afternoon." Ethan soaked up these lessons like a sponge, expanding his understanding of all living things. A few months later, Richard finalized the legal transfer of the ranch to Sarah and Ethan, keeping only a small ownership share for himself and the right to continue living on the property. "Richard," Sarah said on the day the papers were signed, "are you sure about this?" "Absolutely. This ranch belongs to the Wilsons, it always has. But you've invested so many years, so much money. And I've gotten far more in return. I've learned about compassion, about justice, about how to be a better man. Ethan gave me that." The transfer ceremony was simple, held at the town courthouse with the whole family present. Ethan, now 6 years old, didn't fully grasp the legal significance, but knew it was important. "So now the ranch is really ours?" he asked. "It's always been ours, sweetheart," Sarah replied. "Now the papers just agree with what our hearts already knew." Back at the ranch, Richard gathered all the workers to announce the changes. "Everyone, starting today, Mrs. Wilson is the legal owner of this ranch. I'll stay on as manager, but all major decisions will go through her." Jake raised his hand. "Boss, I mean Mrs. Wilson houses, does this change anything for us?" "It does, Jake," Sarah answered. "Now you're working for someone who understands this ranch only thrives because we all take care of it together. The changes were gradually put in place. Sarah established a profit-sharing system for all long-term employees and created an emergency fund to help workers' families in need. "No one who works honestly here will ever go without," she declared. "This ranch takes care of people just like we take care of the animals." The ranch's reputation continued to grow, now not just as an example of animal welfare, but also of social responsibility. Universities began using the property as a case study in rural management and sustainable development courses. Ethan, now formally recognized as the ranch's animal welfare consultant, kept honing his unique skills. At 6 years old, he could spot health issues in animals days before trained veterinarians detected visible symptoms. "Dr. Harrison," Ethan told the ranch vet during a routine checkup, "the cowhope is starting to get sick." "But Ethan, I just examined her. She's perfectly healthy." "She's hiding it, but it hurts here," Ethan said, pointing to his own abdomen. Harrison decided to investigate further and discovered the first signs of intestinal inflammation that could have become serious if not treated early. "How does he do it?" the vet asked Sarah. "Honestly, doctor, I don't know, but I've learned to trust his observations." Ethan's ability began attracting international attention. A team of researchers from Japan came to study his methods, followed by scientists from Germany and the United States. "Mom," Ethan said after a particularly long session of scientific observation, "why are adults so surprised when I say I know what animals are feeling?" "Because most adults have forgotten how to do that, sweetheart. But it's easy. You just have to pay attention. For you, it's easy. For us, it's not. Can I teach you?" And so the Ethan program was born, an educational initiative where the boy taught adults and other children to observe and interpret animal behavior. The program drew participants from across the country and eventually from around the world. Richard watched these sessions with paternal pride. "Linda, can you believe what this boy has created? It's incredible. He's changing how people see animals. And he's completely changed how I see myself." Indeed, Richard's transformation had been radical. The man who once saw animals only as investments now dedicated himself entirely to their well-being. He had become vegetarian, regularly donated to animal sanctuaries, and used his influence to promote animal protection laws. "Richard," Sarah said one afternoon as they watched Ethan teach a group of veterinarians, "have you ever imagined where we'd be if we hadn't met? I'd rather not think about it. I'd probably still be that bitter man who treated thunder like a trophy. And I'd probably still be in a boarding house in Cicero, trying to raise Ethan alone in a big city." Fate has interesting ways of righting wrongs, doesn't it? Or maybe Ethan's the one with that power. They laughed, but there was deep truth in Sarah's observation. Ethan had a unique ability to bring people together and heal old wounds. That ability would be tested again when the farm received an unexpected visitor. "Sarah," the secretary said over the intercom, "there's a man here who says he's a lawyer. He wants to talk about the farm." Sarah and Richard exchanged worried glances. Since the property transfer, they had made sure all the paperwork was in order. The lawyer, a middle-aged man named Dr. O'Connor, brought troubling news. "Mrs. Wilson, I represent the heirs of Dr. Foster, the attorney who mediated the original sale of this property." "What does that have to do with us?" Richard asked. "We found documents among Dr. Foster's personal papers suggesting irregularities in the sale of this farm. My clients believe they're entitled to compensation." Sarah felt her blood run cold. They had finally found peace and stability, and now this. "What kind of irregularities?" she asked. "Evidence that Dr. Foster may have taken part of the sale payment, defrauding both the original seller and buyer." "And what do you want?" "A full audit of all transactions involving this property over the last 20 years, and possible renegotiation of ownership terms." Richard stood up, clearly angry. "Dr. O'Connor, are you trying to blackmail this family?" "It's not blackmail, Mr. Thompson. It's a legitimate legal matter. Based on documents from a dead man we know committed fraud? That will have to be determined by a court." After the lawyer left, Sarah sank into a chair. "Richard, I can't go through this again. Losing everything once more." "Sarah, calm down. We'll figure this out." "How?" They have lawyers, money. We're a family, and families protect each other. That night, Catherine, Richard, Linda, and Sarah gathered to discuss the situation. Ethan was asleep, unaware of the drama unfolding. "Catherine, do you know any more details about what Dr. Foster did to your father? I know he forged some documents, and that he had an accomplice at the county clerk's office." "Who was the accomplice?" "A clerk named Martin, but he left town right after the sale." "Is he still alive?" "I don't know." "Why?" "Because if we can prove Dr. Foster committed fraud, his heirs have no legal grounds to challenge the current ownership." Richard hired a private investigator to track down Martin and others possibly involved in Dr. Foster's scheme. Meanwhile, the family tried to maintain normalcy on the farm, not wanting to alarm Ethan or the workers. But Ethan, with his natural sensitivity, sensed something was wrong. "Mom, why are you sad?" "I'm not sad, sweetheart. Just worried about some grown-up things." "Is it about the farm?" Sarah hesitated. Ethan was too young to understand complex legal matters, but too smart to be fooled. "Yes, Ethan. Some people are saying the farm might not be ours, but it is ours. Thunder told me." "How did he say that?" "He said this land has smelled like the Wilson family for a long time, and that bad people can't take away family smells." Sarah hugged her son, moved by his simple wisdom. 2 weeks later, the investigator brought important news. "I found Martin," he said. He's living in a small town in Arkansas, and he has some interesting things to say." "Will he cooperate?" "Yes. Seems he's carried guilt about what happened all these years." "When can we talk to him?" "He's coming here tomorrow." Martin arrived the next morning, a 70-year-old man with white hair and a frail appearance. He carried an old box of documents. "Mrs. Sarah, I know who you are," he said as he sat down, "and I've come to ask forgiveness for what I did to your family." "What exactly did you do?" "I helped Dr. Foster falsify your father-in-law's debt documents. We changed numbers, created loans that never existed." "Why?" "Because Dr. Foster promised to pay me well, and I was struggling at the time, but I never imagined the suffering we'd cause." Martin opened the box and showed the original documents. "I kept copies of everything. All these years, I thought about destroying them, but something stopped me. I guess I knew one day I'd have to make things right." The documents were definitive proof of the fraud. They clearly showed how Dr. Foster had artificially inflated William Wilson's debts to force the sale of the farm below market value. "Martin, will you testify about this?" "I will. It's time to fix what I did wrong." With the evidence Martin provided, Richard hired a lawyer specializing in real estate fraud. The case against Dr. Foster's heirs became very strong. But the real surprise came when the investigator discovered the heirs who had filed the lawsuit weren't actually related to Dr. Foster. "They're real estate speculators," the investigator explained. "They found out about the farm's current value and tried to use the messy documents Dr. Foster left behind to blackmail you. So it's all a scam." "Completely. They were betting you'd pay to avoid a long legal battle." The case was resolved quickly once the evidence was presented. The fake heirs dropped the lawsuit and were even prosecuted for attempted extortion. "Sarah," Richard said after the final resolution, "now we can truly say the farm is yours for good." "Wow, Richard, always ours." To celebrate, the family organized a party at the ranch. All the employees, neighbors, and friends were invited. Ethan insisted that Thunder join the party, and no one dared to refuse. During the party, Ethan climbed onto a chair to give a speech. "Everyone," he said in his still childish but surprisingly firm voice, "I want to thank you all for taking care of our family." The crowd laughed and applauded. "And I want to thank Thunder for teaching me that friendship is more important than anything else." Thunder, as if understanding, let out a loud bellow, making everyone burst into laughter. "But most of all," Ethan continued, "I want to thank Uncle Richard for learning that animals have feelings too." Richard walked over to Ethan and picked him up. "Ethan, you're the one who taught me that." "No, Uncle Richard, you already knew, you just forgot." Those simple words perfectly summed up their journey. They hadn't learned anything truly new, just rediscovered fundamental truths about compassion, family, and respect for all living beings. The party went on late into the night. When it finally ended and the last guests had left, the family gathered on the porch of the main house. "Sarah," Catherine said, "can you believe everything that's happened since we got here? Sometimes it feels like a dream." "For me too," Richard said. "2 years ago, I was a bitter man, alone with my wealth. Now I have a real family. And Thunder has real friends," Ethan added, pointing to the pasture where the bull rested peacefully. "Ethan," Linda asked, "what do you think the future holds for all of us?" Ethan thought carefully, as he always did with important questions. "I think we'll keep learning from each other. People learning from animals, animals learning from people, and everyone getting happier. What about the ranch? The ranch will grow, not in size but in love. People will come from far away to learn how to care for animals the right way." Ethan's predictions proved accurate. In the years that followed, the ranch became an international center for studies on animal welfare and sustainable management. Ethan grew and thrived, always keeping his special connection with animals, but also showing interest in other areas of knowledge. By 12, he already spoke 3 languages and had written a children's book about his friendship with Thunder. The book's profits were entirely donated to shelters for abandoned animals. Richard and Sarah gradually expanded the ranch's mission, creating animal-assisted therapy programs for children with emotional struggles. Ethan became the lead instructor, teaching other kids how to connect with animals the way he did. "Ethan," a little girl asked during a therapy session, "how did you learn to talk to animals?" "I don't talk to them." Ethan, now 12 and with wisdom that impressed adults, replied, "I listen. The difference is, I listen not just with my ears, but with my heart." Can anyone learn that? Anyone who really wants to. The problem is, most grown-ups are too busy to stop and listen. These sessions were recorded and used in universities worldwide as teaching material on emotional intelligence and interspecies communication. Thunder, now over 20, had become the gentle patriarch of the ranch. Despite his age, he remained active and was still Ethan's best friend. The other animals seemed to respect him as a kind of wise leader. "Uncle Richard," Ethan said one afternoon as they watched Thunder teach a young calf how to behave properly, "do you think Thunder knows he changed our lives?" "What do you think, Ethan?" "I think he knows, and I think he's proud." "Proud of what?" "Of helping a lost family find their way back to each other." Richard smiled, still struck by the depth of Ethan's insights, even after all these years. The farm had thrived beyond all expectations. Production had steadily increased, but more importantly, it had become a global model for how agriculture could be ethical, sustainable, and profitable all at once. Sarah had proven to be an exceptional manager, expanding operations to include organic farming, solar energy, and a reforestation program that significantly boosted local biodiversity. Catherine developed the organic garden into a thriving business, supplying fresh produce to high-end restaurants across the region. Her specialty was medicinal herbs, grown using ancient recipes she'd learned from her mother. Linda became the farm's official documentarian, recording not just innovations in animal welfare, but also the personal transformation stories of everyone involved. "Linda," Sarah said one afternoon as they reviewed old footage, "do you realize we've documented a real revolution here?" "How so?" "We changed the way an entire farm operates. We changed the lives of dozens of families. And it all started with a 5-year-old boy riding a bull. And the most amazing part is, the transformation keeps going. Every new visitor takes something from here and plants it somewhere else." It was true. Former visitors had implemented similar practices on farms across 5 continents. An informal network of compassionate farms was spreading worldwide, all inspired by the model Ethan and Thunder had created. "Ethan," a journalist asked during an interview for an international documentary, "did you ever imagine your friendship with Thunder would have such a huge impact?" "No," replied Ethan, now 14. "I just didn't want him to be sad anymore. I didn't know it could help other animals in other places. And how does it feel knowing you've influenced so many people? I'm happy, But I'm also sad because it took adults so long to realize animals have feelings. Why do you think that happened? I think when people get too worried about money, they forget to pay attention to other important things. And you never forgot. No. My mom always taught me that money is important to live, but love is important to be happy. The interview went viral on social media, inspiring a new generation of young animal rights activists. But for Ethan, fame was never the goal. He still woke up early every morning to check on every animal on the farm, greeting each by name and watching for small signs that might indicate health or happiness issues. "Good morning, Star," he'd say to the cow who had been one of the first to receive a name. "How'd you sleep?" Star would answer with a soft moo, and Ethan would smile, understanding exactly what she meant. By 15, Ethan spoke 4 languages and had been accepted to several prestigious universities with full scholarships, but he chose to continue his studies remotely so he wouldn't have to leave the farm. "Ethan," Sarah said, "are you sure you don't want the traditional college experience?" "Mom, my university is here. I learn something new every day from the animals, the visitors, our family." "But what about your ambitions, your dreams for the future?" "My dream is to keep helping people understand animals, and for that, I need to be where they are." Sarah smiled, proud of her son's maturity and determination. By then, the farm welcomed over 1,000 visitors a month, researchers, students, farmers, and the simply curious. Ethan treated everyone with the same patience and enthusiasm, adapting his language for each type of audience. For young children, he used games and play. For scientists, he presented detailed behavioral data. For practical farmers, he focused on economic results and productivity. "The message is always the same," he explained to Richard, "but the way of communicating changes depending on who's listening. When did you learn that?" "By watching Thunder. He behaves differently with each person, depending on what they need. With children, he's playful. With nervous adults, he stays very calm so as not to scare them." Richard continued to be amazed by Ethan's observations. At 70 years old, he still learned something new from the boy every day. Thunder's health began to decline gradually when he turned 25, an advanced age for a bull. Ethan noticed the changes even before the veterinarians. "Uncle Richard, Thunder is getting tired," he said one morning. "Tired how?" "It's not tiredness of the body, it's tiredness of the soul. He's preparing to rest." Richard felt his heart tighten. Thunder had been the catalyst for all the positive transformations in their lives. What can we do for him? We can make sure he feels loved and important until the end, and we can ensure his story continues to be told. In the following months, Ethan spent even more time with Thunder, recording videos that documented his unique personality and the lessons he had taught over the years. When Thunder finally passed away on a quiet spring morning, the entire farm stopped to honor his memory. Ethan, now 16, gave a moving speech during the ceremony. "Thunder taught us that size and strength mean nothing without kindness. He taught us that memory and gratitude are the most important gifts we can give each other. And he taught us that true love knows no species, age, or social condition." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story of resilience and how it touched your heart. Do you believe small acts of compassion can truly transform entire lives? Share your honest opinion in the comments, and if this narrative moved you as much as it moved us to tell it, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of love and transformation.